This is a story of betrayal and lies. A story that has ended multiple friendships. I've been in the modding community for quite a while. I've heard bizarre stories and seen events happen from a unique perspective, but never something quite like this, and it hits close to home. I've considered not making this video about 3 times already, but at this point I can't avoid it. Also, please don't go and harass anybody because of this video. It's not going to help anyone. Some of you might have heard about the drama between OSA and OStim, but there's a lot hidden to the general public. However, that changes today. It all starts back in 2015 when CE0 published OSA Skyrim Ascendancy Engine, an amazing animation framework with granular control powered by ActionScript. Modules could be created for the framework, and later on CE0 would release the first module, OSex. OSex introduced intimacy, romance, and sex to Skyrim. It's arguably one of the best interactive adult experiences ever created, and it's undeniable CE0 is an extremely talented person. Many people, myself included, were blown away by the quality and effort put into OSA. I don't think anybody expected it. However, at the time, there were of course other adult frameworks like SexLab that had many more add-ons. So from what I could tell, people were hesitant to switch over. Additionally, OSA and OSEX's biggest problem was that they lacked third-party mod support. It was much more difficult to create add-ons for OSA than for SexLab. I believe that this was the primary reason it never really took off, but at some point things would die down and CE0 would disappear. OSA and OSEX weren't being worked on anymore. Fast forward 5 years later, and a talented modder by the name of Skyrim would burst onto the scene with OStim. OStim is something akin to a third-party API wrapper, and would fix many of OSEX's shortcomings. It's a fact that OSA was cryptic as hell. Before OStim, making content for OSA was like asking a kid how to do rocket science. OSA was powerful, but very few people could understand how it worked. Its API had minimal functionality, lacked basic features, and had no documentation. Thankfully, Skyrim helped fix this. OStim simplified OSEX's obscure API, added numerous quality of life fixes, provided documentation, and implemented gameplay features such as a stimulation system. This gave OSEX the third-party mod support it needed, and gameplay features it was lacking. OStim breathed new life into OSEX, and as a result, it was much easier for others to help develop and help contribute to the project. And this is why I think OStim was successful. But OStim didn't stop there. The project grew, and eventually Skyrim wanted OStim to become the best sex mod for Skyrim. He wanted OStim to compete with SexLab. Skyrim created a community, and other talented modders like Nem and Miguel joined. Nem would contribute a lot to OStim and would become good friends with Skyrim. This will be important for later. And Miguel started working on add-ons for OStim, like OVoice in late 2020. It's also important for later on that I mention Miguel knew CE0 and was an old friend of his. Later, Skyrim would go to open a Patreon and eventually release more and more add-ons for OStim, and it was a great success. He would let his Patreons have early access to his latest add-on for a month, after which he would then release them publicly. This business model is not uncommon and is the same one my buddies D-Star, Bot User, and Mike Nike use as well. But the sheer demand for these add-ons was overwhelming. At its peak, Skyrim was receiving well over $3,000 a month, which is remarkable, but it's not unheard of. I mean, there are other Skyrim modders like Baka Factory who pull in almost $8,000 a month making SexLab animations. So yeah, if you're looking to make some money, that's one way of doing it. But anyway, you get the point. OSA was revolutionary, but so was OStim. However, things would change when CE0 returned. When CE0 came back, everything was going well. It seemed that he enjoyed the interest people had in OStim, and he publicly endorsed OStim. He also created a Discord server, and I spoke to him a couple of times in voice chat. He was a pretty chill person to talk to. After talking with him, I learned he wanted to continue his projects, and at the time, he was working on a new rig and some animations. More and more people joined CE0's Discord server, notably programmers like El Paco, Ace, who would later go on to be taught how to animate by CE0 himself, and 3D modelers like Lil Pion. For months, things were fine, but things would turn sour. From what I could gather, it seemed that at some point, CO had a problem. He wanted to control the direction of OSA and OSEX. It seemed that Sarion was dictating this at the time, so I believe this was something CO did not want. I can understand CO here. I guess for him it felt like he was losing control of his own work, which isn't a nice feeling. However, others have speculated he didn't just want control back. It's very possible CO became jealous of Sarion and the OStim modders. Later, CO announced he was going to be updating OSA to fix some bugs and to add new features. Sarion heard this, but was concerned these updates would break OStim, so he asked CO not to do this, and instead he asked CO to work with him to make these changes in OStim instead. Neither of them replied to each other after this, and it was never followed up upon. Then, shit hit the fan. CO released an update to OSA, but the update would detect if you had OStim installed. If you did, it would display a piracy message, and this message was persistent. It covered the entire screen, preventing anybody with OStim from playing. Later on, Sarion said he tried to message CO, but did not get a response. Sarion then created a post on his Patreon stating, I quote, "A few months ago, if you recall, CO, OSA and OSEX's creator, returned after 2 years. At that time, CO endorsed the OStim project. I have not been in much contact with him since then. However, this morning he released a version of OSA that seems to intentionally stop the game and show an anti-piracy message. I attempted to contact CO through DMs, but did not receive a response. I offered some money from the OStim Patreon to CO on the day we met, but he politely declined, saying financial support was not needed. I also made it a point never to redistribute CO's artwork or animations. However, I greatly respect CO's work and his rights to his work, and will take this as a request to halt the OStim project." After speaking with Sarion myself, I learned that this drama was really getting to him, and he needed to step away from it all. However, soon after, OSEX was temporarily taken down from the Nexus. Apparently, it was taken down due to a copyright claim. The following reason was, I received a copyright claim for about 75% of the animations in my mod, and was told I had to remove them. This broke everything due to how animation scenes were connected. I am sorting this out, but it will take time. Thank you for your patience. But hold on. If you remember the piracy message CO posted, he mentions that OSEX was made entirely by himself. Was he lying? Well, here's a part where we need to do some speculation. I personally don't think CO was lying when he said that OSA and OSEX were made by him and him alone. And here's why I think he did this. Not too long ago, the Nexus changed their terms of service. Some of you might have heard, but Nexus Mods released a lengthy blog post detailing some changes that were coming alongside their new feature, Collections. Collections allows users to curate a list of mods that others can download. But there's a problem. What happens if an important mod in the list gets taken down? Well, the list will break. The Nexus doesn't want this to happen, so they decided to change their terms of service. They announced a grace period where anybody could take their mods off the site for good, but after that month, all mods uploaded to their site essentially become theirs. Mod authors will no longer be able to take their mods off the site, and they will be forever archived. The community was in uproar, but the changes were implemented. This alone is a huge topic that I won't go too much into detail. Hell, I could make a whole separate other video talking about this mess. But what's important to take away from this is that you cannot take your mods off the Nexus anymore after you upload them. Or can you? I am certain CO made all the animations himself. I don't think another person copyright striked him, otherwise why would the timing be so convenient? Which leaves only one culprit, CO himself. Now you might ask yourself, but why on earth would CO want to copyright strike himself? Well, there are two reasons why I think he would want to do this. The first reason would be to regain control of his own mod. If you really wanted to regain control of your own mod from the Nexus after their new terms of service, well, the only way to do this would be to take it down with a copyright strike, which is what I initially thought CEO's plan was, but later I realized there's an additional reason I think he did this. To get back at OStim. You see, OStim requires OSEX to be up on the Nexus to survive. If OSEX is taken down because of a copyright strike, OStim will die. I really didn't want to believe this was the case. I spoke with CEO and I tried to smooth things over. And CEO told me he was frustrated and it felt like he was competing with his own work, which I can understand. However, CEO had claimed later that he never gave permissions to Skyrim for making OStim, but this is incorrect. OStim has never infringed OSA's copyright or permissions in any way. Firstly, due to CEO's own original permissions for OSA, which allowed people to use the scripts and interact with OSA's engine freely. Secondly, while I was researching, I learned that a few months ago when CEO returned after all those years, he started talking with his old friend Miguel. During their conversation, Miguel mentioned that arguments broke out in the OStim community. OStim developers were unsure whether or not the Flash code could be touched because it had embedded copyrighted images in them. Upon hearing this, CEO decided to give Miguel full permissions to do as they please with OSA and OSEX. Additionally, CEO also gave Miguel explicit permission to grant those permissions to others, which he did. Miguel gave these permissions to Skyrim, so CEO lied. Make of it what you will, but in my opinion this does not justify his actions to try and take OStim down. Let's rewind back to when CEO decided to update OSA to display that piracy message. Nexus Terms of Service prohibits a mod that prevents users from playing the game. So after a discussion between OStim contributor Nem, CEO, and a Nexus Mods admin, an agreement was struck. Due to the way CEO had worded his permissions for OSA, namely, you can use any part of the Papyrus scripts in your own project, and how OStim was implemented with script edits, OStim was operating within the permissions CEO had set out. The Nexus admin therefore decided that OStim was off the hook. Once this was made clear to CEO, he was essentially forced to remove the anti-piracy message. I'm not sure what CEO was playing at here. He went about this in a very strange way. He knew from the start he had no leg to stand on when it came to permissions, because otherwise, instead of putting the piracy notice, he could have just requested the Nexus to take down OStim for operating outside of his permissions. This happens all the time, and if OStim was actually infringing his permissions, of course they would have taken appropriate actions. But anyway, let's continue. During this discussion, it was also agreed that OSA 2.03 would be the last version of OSA to support OStim. However, a version of it would still remain on the Nexus for posterity's sake. It was also agreed that CEO's new version of OSA, OSA Plus, would have much more locked down permissions. Also, during these talks, CEO was apparently still open to working with OStim in general for add-ons or API requests. So it seemed like things were finally sorting themselves out. It also seemed OStim could later be migrated to work with OSA Plus, so it would be a win for everybody. But at one point, Ace, a good friend and animator CEO taught, came out saying he was working on an animation pack called OpenSex, an alternative for OSEX. CEO was initially okay with this, but later this angered him. CEO had taught Ace personally, and had even given him his animation rig. He trusted Ace a lot. I guess from CEO's perspective, it must have felt like he was backstabbed. And at some point, after Ace's announcement, CEO lost it in the OStim Discord. He called Ace a snake, and spent hours arguing. It was bad for everyone involved, both on his side and the OStim side. Miguel, El Paco, and many others tried calming him down while doing damage control, but in the end, Ace was banned from CEO's server. Later down the line, CEO released an animation pack for OSEX, but his new pack had animation data that was incompatible with OStim, and intentionally broke some of its features. It appears that CO never wanted to work with OStim. Miguel had had enough. With OStim being constantly broken, it would seriously impede his ability to continue working on his add-ons for OStim. Whether CO wants to acknowledge it or not, his attacks on OStim were indirectly attacking his old friend Miguel. Miguel then vented his frustration to El Paco and Lopion in voice chat on CO's server, revealing the truth of why CO's new animations didn't work well with OStim. But El Paco and Lopion still had faith in CO. They took Miguel's words with a grain of salt. The next day, El Paco tried to smooth things over with Miguel and CO. He requested CO to fix his animation pack so it would work with OStim. CO reluctantly agreed to it, and El Paco told Miguel CO would fix it. But Miguel told El Paco he couldn't trust CO anymore, after being attacked over and over again, being betrayed and lied to too many times. You have to understand it was quite tough on El Paco. El Paco was friends with CO and spent a lot of time helping him through contributions and giving him advice. When CO pulled that move with the piracy message, El Paco and many others came to the conclusion that CO had full rights to his work, including breaking compatibility with OStim at the time. El Paco was giving CO a lot of PR advice and told him to treat OStim respectfully until he had at least a good alternative to offer, so he wouldn't destroy his relationships with developers who could help contribute to his projects down the line. But CO kept pulling bad moves, alienating OStim members and even his own friends, even though he said he would stop. But despite this at the time, El Paco still had faith CO was being honest, transparent, and had good intentions. The conversation between Miguel and El Paco continued, but at one point, Miguel said fuck it, and showed El Paco something that changed everything. Miguel showed him the screenshot of CO giving Miguel full rights over OSA and OSEX, including the permission to give those rights to others. El Paco was heartbroken. He was extremely conflicted and offended that CO was lying to him this entire time on such a key point. El Paco had been red-pilled, and later made a public post in CO's Discord server saying he was going to be taking a step back from the community for personal reasons. CO then questioned El Paco in DMs, but El Paco couldn't hold it in anymore. El Paco felt betrayed and told CO after what he had learned, he felt like he didn't want to support him anymore, but he also said he wouldn't go against him either. However, as soon as El Paco said this, CO snapped. CO turned on El Paco, calling him a traitor, saying Miguel had plotted a coup, then went on a banning spree, banning Miguel, Lopion, El Paco, and many other people associated with OStim from his server. I'm still not sure what to fully make of this story. I'm not a fan of drama, but there are some extremely important things we can learn here. Attacking the end users is never a good idea, and not making compromises for the common enjoyment of the mod users can stagnate the modding scene. When you're being helped, you don't have the obligation to help others, but if you don't pass that torch forward, it ends up being bad for the end users. In my opinion, CO shouldn't have banned the OStim contributors. Everyone I've spoken to hates this drama. All we want to see is everyone happy, contributing to what could have been the best adult framework ever made. I guess the story isn't finished. The future of OStim and OSA Plus is still yet to be decided. I did hear from them that they wish to break OStim off from OSA and OSEX, and work on a new SKSE-based framework. I've heard CO will continue working on OSA Plus. And as for Skyrim, well, I heard from Miguel he might be returning soon, and I really hope he does. It's sad things turned out the way they did, and I'm not blaming anybody here. I can see where everybody is coming from. But at this point, we just need to accept what has happened, learn from it, and move on. Thanks for watching the video. I don't normally make this kind of content, but I hope you can appreciate why I took time to cover this story. I've put a lot on the line to tell it, and I'll have to face the consequences for sharing it. So if you liked the video, I'd appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe. Alright, take care.